It's been a very long time since I've done anything on here, which is bonkers. But I should probably lead with Christ is risen. And it's been wild. I've been kind of paying attention every now and then to the YouTube channel, and people are still watching stuff. People are primarily watching the video of my interview with Deacon Hynek from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, in part probably because of this whole video that's going around with the other deacon from the Ethiopian Church, and Cliff, whatever his last name is, that evangelist that visits college campuses, and how that blew up and turned into an internet sensation of everybody going all over the place to interview him. I actually had like a level of not pity, but compassion, empathy, concern for that deacon, just to get dragged, whatever it is, into the internet so violently like that, and basically exploited for clicks. You might hear some cynicism in my voice about the internet and wonder why I'm here. A lot of people keep telling me that I have a weird story and to just share things with people. So I want to try to do something a little bit different, because I've often complained about the culture of Protestant becomes Orthodox, Orthodox becomes Catholic, Catholic becomes something else, somebody else does something, moves to this, moves to that. And all this like triumphalist energy that exists online of people just trying to rap battle one another theologically and quote mine the fathers left and right to try to prove their point and talk about how everybody else is wrong. And it's become this terrible game of let's see how many souls we can get on our side, rather than just preaching the gospel and sharing how many souls have come to know our sweet Lord. And I'm not going to take any kind of triumphalist attitude about anything. I'm going to share some books. I'm going to share 10 books that I read personally that helped me eventually make my way into the Coptic Orthodox Church for their beauty and for the kind of the information I gathered from them. None of them, with maybe 2 exceptions, 2 of the 10 were kind of these theological heavy hitters. I think there are plenty of good reasons people read books and they end up becoming Roman Catholic or Eastern Catholic or maybe Reformed, though I maybe believe that one a little less, or Eastern Orthodox or whatever it might be. And I think the other thing is we have a terrible amount of impatience. And I hate to say it, but we don't trust the Holy Spirit. Just because somebody moves into one lane for a while, maybe doesn't mean that's always where they're going to be, or maybe that's where they need to be to know Christ better at that moment. I was nominally Christian. I was nothing. I eventually had a conversion touring with a heavy metal band. I became a pastor in a Pentecostal church for 5 years. From there, I started moving towards Eastern Orthodoxy, spent a few years in Byzantine Catholicism, eventually went back to Eastern Orthodoxy, and then made my way into the Coptic Orthodox Church. And I like to think this is where I'm going to spend the rest of my life, but I'd rather just say I'm going to spend the rest of my life chasing after Christ, getting to know him better and receiving him and conforming myself to him by taking up my cross and following him the best that I can. So I don't know. Maybe you hear my dog snoring in the background. Beats me. Love the shirt. The Legend of Dad, Children of the Wild. Cheers. Cow mug. Okay. Now that we've gotten into it, let's get into it. 10 books in no particular order. And feel free along the way to interrupt or ask questions or make your own suggestions of things, whatever you're into in the chat. The first book is A Silent Patriarch, a biography on Pope Kyrillos VI of the Coptic Orthodox Church. I received this book a very long time ago as part of a contract deal I had with the publisher, St. Vladimir Seminary Press. where I was contracted to edit audiobooks for them and ended up never editing a single audiobook for them. Became very good friends with the voice actor. I guess that would be the voiceover artist who does the audio version of this, Jonah Martin. Shout out Jonah. Beautiful man, sultry voice. And this book sat on my shelf for a very long time. I had this book before I had any interest in even exploring the Coptic Orthodox Church. But after I stumbled into a parish nearby, actually on an errand for work to try to make connections with other Orthodox churches in my area to bring them together to serve people who were in need, Matthew 25 stuff, the hungry, the naked, etc. Not that there's a bunch of naked people running around my town. I don't know, maybe in your town, whatever, let me know. I figured maybe I should give this a shot because everybody and their mother was talking about it. It seemed like a daunting read, but it really isn't. It's very easy. I'll just read you the little excerpt on the back here. A Silent Patriarch, Kyrillos VI, is the first scholarly biography of the desert hermit who became a most unlikely patriarch. Until now, the details of his life have remained hidden. As patriarch, Kyrillos inherited a bleeding church, one confronted by political Islamism, an indifferent Muslim president, and the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood. Silent in the face of persecution, mockery, and criticism, Kyrillos stood at the head of a nearly impossible spiritual revolution. But by the time he reposed, everything had changed. So it goes from the earliest days of his life, and even the recognition that he's one of us, he's cut from the same cloth. People recognizing that as a child, this man would dress in all black and retreat to his room to pray the hours and fast. And that he was eventually elected to the patriarchate and lived a very humble, simple life, trying to retreat to a windmill in the desert. It was just a really deep spiritual book, a very inspiring book about kind of that the leadership of this church is so deeply rooted in prayer and not politics. I mean, he really wanted nothing to do with it. Beautiful stories about Pope Kyrillos, that he was slandered by newspapers. Eventually that newspaper was shut down. And rather than viewing it as he's like free from all of this slander, he wrote and said, these people need jobs. Their families are depending on them, and like help these people find jobs. He was a pope during the apparitions of Our Lady of Zaytun, which are like some of the most attested apparitions of the Virgin Mary anywhere, that were even first recognized by two Muslim mechanics. The Muslim government approved the apparition even before the church did. It's just crazy. And the amount of reform that he brought to the church at a time where there was issues like simony and buying and selling of offices, the birth of the Sunday school movement, just the legacy that this man, this modern saint has left on the church is incredible. So if ever you visit a Coptic Orthodox church, you will likely see his image somewhere and hear people talk about Baba Kyrillos. He's just wonderful. And I can't recommend this book enough. It's good on that one. The next one I actually don't have a copy of, but I read it. I think I read a PDF of it, which is On the Unity of Christ by St. Cyril of Alexandria. I can't quote anything about this book to you. I can't really tell you any specifics about it because it's been a while since I read it. But when I first started showing up to a Coptic parish, I was floored by the liturgy first. Really fell in love with kind of the mystique of the liturgy and how folky of the people it was. Just felt like children crying out to their father. And I talked to the priest. I said, Abuna, you have to like tell me what's really different here. I know we have this Christology thing, but like what's going on? What's really different? Convince me. And he said, well, the Holy Spirit will convict, but it's not my job to convince anybody of anything. There's no reason why you should leave one thing for another unless God moves you there. Beautiful answer, but help me understand nevertheless. So he shared with me On the Unity of Christ by St. Cyril, and I read it and I thought, okay, this is a shared saint between both of us. But when I read this, nothing makes more sense. I remember coming upstairs, I was reading it in my basement, and I said to my wife, I'm sold on this whole like Miaphysite thing. You know, it's kind of intuitively how I already would express the whole human divine thing when it comes to our Lord. And she says, the first time in a long time I've heard you say you were convinced of anything. Because I've always tried to take the posture of like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not getting it. Maybe I'm missing something, whether it came to the Immaculate Conception or the Bishop of Rome and the papacy and the Catholic Church or whatever it might be. I've always tried my best to understand those things. And still to this day, I feel like with enough work, I could sign off on some variation or some expression of a lot of these different things. So to that end, I kind of take an apostolic indifferentist approach. But I'm very happy with where I am. And that book was a big part of it, just to say like, okay, at the very least, I know that we have the same Christology. And that's maybe a controversial opinion that some people agree or disagree with. But another thing our priest said was, what good is it to have the truth if you can't express it clearly enough? And I do feel like as convoluted a thing as Christology is to explain, I think the Oriental churches kind of have an edge on it. Next is My American Flight to Egypt by Thilo Young. A Western evangelical discovers the ancient faith. If you follow the channel at all, ever, Thilo, I interviewed Thilo here, so you can find it. I'll put a link or whatever somewhere, and you can just kind of hear his story. And it was inspiring to see somebody go through basically all the same things I was going through. He was in a similar position of leadership in an evangelical church, and just through reading, started looking for the unified voice of the early church, and felt like he found that in Orthodoxy. And I remember pressing him on like, why Oriental Orthodox and not Eastern Orthodox? And essentially it came down to, that's just the parish I went to. He doesn't really address that in the book, which part of me kind of really, I don't know, I wish he would have a little bit more, but otherwise it's just a extremely easy read. It's just his life. It's not about heavy theology. His wife's involved, which I think it's like, if I had to compare it to anything, anybody who's in the Catholic world, I would say this is like the Coptic version of Rome Sweet Home. Just them sharing their story and the beauty that's in it. And he references a priest in here, Father Bishoy Brownfield, who is just a convert priest, just an American dude who, through Thilo, I ended up getting connected with and called and had a beautiful conversation with. He's a rough around the edges kind of priest, a former bodybuilder, actually, who owned like a bodybuilding magazine empire of some sort. And I remember him saying to me, like, okay, you read the books. That's terrific. I'm glad you did that. But you need a father. All of this is for nothing if you don't have fatherhood in your life. And he really urged me to just find a spiritual father. Now, I had and still have spiritual fatherhood in my life from a lot of different priests. I have my father of confession now in the Coptic Orthodox Church, who is just a beautiful confessor. I still have a Roman Catholic monk that I meet with fairly regularly for spiritual direction of some sort. I talk to just a lot of different people, but I think he really hit something there. And that's the weird thing about like online theology and online apologetics and all of these different things, is it's devoid of fatherhood. I mean, it's doing spiritual life in a vacuum for the most part. I don't know. It's weird. I'm kind of down on the whole thing, if I'm being honest with you. And that's why I haven't done anything here for such a long time. Rather, I've been focusing on the locals community, which has been a real blessing in my life. And I think most of you watching right now are from that community. And I'll share more about that later. Haley the mod is here. You know, I always feel official when I see the little wrench next to your name. It reminds me that by all criteria, I've made it. All right. Next book, Characteristics of the Spiritual Path by His Holiness Pope Shenouda III. This book just goes through all these different things about spiritual life: the spiritual goal, fear of God, self-coercion, inner and positive work, wisdom and discernment, seriousness and commitment, faithfulness, being faithful in few things, etc., etc. And what really struck me about this was how simple it is. Like, I thought, okay, great, this is, you know, another patriarch of the church, characteristics of the spiritual path, rooted in this desert wisdom, right? And it just takes the scriptures and unpacks them time after time. And a lot of times takes the scriptures and unpacks them in a way that my Western mind, kind of the little formation I have is from Protestantism in my early life, and just understands the scriptures in a way that I never would have. And I remember sharing this book with Matt Fradd, of all people. And if you're familiar with Pints with Aquinas, and he read through it and he's like, this guy's so simple and so straightforward and so accessible and so practical. There's nothing that's like overly profound, but it's absolutely applicable to my life. So I recommend this book to everybody. And this was recommended to me directly from my priest. The spiritual goal, reasons for success. The sole goal is God. False aims, constancy of the spiritual goal. Examples of those who fall. Examples of steadfastness, like the repentance, the martyrs. You start and continue. I mean, wisdom, it's so good. I actually should reread this book. And I think the key component to me was the part about being steadfast and constant. Because as I said in the very beginning, I bounced around quite a bit. And it wasn't like I was intentionally trying to be unstable or immature about everything. I was trying to gain understanding. And I think there was a lot of value in gaining that understanding in the context of parishes, not just in reading books. Like these shelves have a ton of books, as well as a bunch of games. But like, I've read a bunch of Catholic books. I've read a bunch of Orthodox books. I've read a bunch of books against each other and that sort of thing. But to spend time in a parish and ask somebody like, okay, tell me what you believe and why and how you process through this. And let me pray with you. Let me hear the hymns that you sing. Let me experience a liturgical year with you. Let me celebrate. Let me have joy with you. Let me have sorrow with you. It just humanizes everything in a way that the books don't, So even as I'm suggesting these books, if you're interested in any of this, go visit a parish. And I'm not saying go visit a parish, any parish, by the way, whatever it is, whatever communion it's a part of. I'm not telling you to do that to try to become something else, but to better understand spiritual neighbors and better appreciate the fact that they are actually Christians, even if they don't, in your opinion or in your fact, in your correctness, don't have the, quote, fullness of the apostolic tradition, whatever it might be. Doesn't mean that they're not Christians. Doesn't mean that they don't know Christ. So it's something to consider. Next book, another one that I actually gave this away and never bought another copy of. And this is another theological book, is the Council of Chalcedon, re-examined, by Father V.C. Samuel, who's a priest in the Indian Orthodox Church, the Malankara. This is the most unbiased book you can find on the whole topic. So if you're unfamiliar with what happened, the Oriental Orthodox churches, which is the communion of like the Coptic Church, the Ethiopian Church, Eritrean Church, the Indian Church, the Syriac Church, there was a split that happened in the 5th century around 451 at the 4th Ecumenical Council, ecumenical to everyone but us, I guess, and the Assyrian Church of the East, over the issue of natures of Christ, right? And it largely came down to political issues and linguistic issues. But this book kind of goes through it like bit by bit, goes through the text of the council, goes through the Tome of Leo, which is written by Pope Leo and the Catholic Church, and why the Oriental churches found that problematic. Armenian Church was another one. I forgot about that. And is very unbiased about it. It says like, okay, here's why this side came out this way and how they interpreted it and understood it and the language. And here's why this side came out this way. And again, ultimately it was like, okay, nobody was really necessarily even kind of excommunicated for being heretics proper. Like even, if I remember correctly, and I know the internet is going to absolutely hang me if I get this wrong, but Dioscorus, was excommunicated for not attending, not even for heresy. And a friend of mine who's a scholar, and he's actually in the Byzantine Catholic Seminary right now in Pittsburgh, said, like, this makes the Coptic Church far more viable than I ever thought. So I highly recommend that. My guy, my dude. This is the first time I've ever streamed from the actual YouTube built-in streaming function. I normally always use StreamYard. So I don't even know how to understand how many people are even watching this right now, which is fantastic, actually, because it doesn't matter. This is for anybody who watches it and is interested in these sort of things. So next book, The 21, A Journey into the Land of Coptic Martyrs by Martin Mosebach. So this book, if you're not familiar with the story of the 21 Coptic martyrs, it is an incredible and beautiful story of faith. Shared saints, by the way. Shared saints between the Oriental churches, Coptic Church specifically, obviously, and the Roman Catholic Church. And it's interesting that between our communions, we have shared saints that are like way after the schism. I mean, these guys were in 2015, if memory serves correctly. And we also have St. Gregory of Narek, who was a saint in the Armenian Apostolic Church that was canonized as a doctor of the church in the Catholic Church. So this book is basically written as like investigative journalism from a traditional, like Latin mass going Roman Catholic fellow from Germany who was like, okay, what's up with these guys that were so willing to just accept martyrdom for their faith? Poor blue collar guys who were in Libya just for work, left their families behind. And by the way, there was only 20 of them. And as they were being paraded across the beach to be beheaded by ISIS, the 21st one, to the best of my understanding, was so moved by that faith that was like, their God is my God. He was a Ghanaian man and ended up giving his life in the same way. Just the amount of revival of faith that these 21 men have brought into the Coptic Church is absolutely incredible. And martyrdom is such a real part of the Coptic Church. Like, it's the part of a lot of churches. But everybody I know in my parish is 1 degree separated from somebody who's given their life for Christ. One of our closest friends, her uncle, I believe she said, had a shop in Egypt and had like an icon of St. Mary up. And a man came in and told him to take it down, and he refused. He was shot in the face on the spot. My priest said his spiritual father was killed in a church bombing, if I remember correctly. And this isn't like to brag about, look how cool we are. Our people still give their lives for this. But I think it's a testimony to how alive the faith is and how connected to the earliest days of the church it is, or the earliest, I mean, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. Literally, this is like the very beginning, right? And it's still living in that same, still swimming in that same ethos. So yeah, this man, Martin, was very moved by it. And he goes through he interviews their families, shares some pictures from them. Highly recommend this book. It's another easy read for sure. Mary says, I'm just happy you're doing this. If I click this, will it pop up? How do I make things pop up on here? I don't know. 1 million watchers, says Alex. Hey, when there's angels around, there's always a million. Posted this on Kyle's Discord. Thanks, brother. Yeah, I love you guys for being here. That's so rad. Okay. Next one. This was the actual, this one and the next one are the last 2 books I read before being received into the Coptic Orthodox Church. I spent a lot of time in the Byzantine liturgy. And I guess a lot is relative. Some people have spent their whole lives or 10 plus years. But I'm kind of a all-in kind of guy, and I'm always trying to understand and know everything I can about something. So when I dove headfirst into the Byzantine world, whether it was Eastern Orthodox or Eastern Catholic, I wanted to know as much as I could. So I understood that liturgy a good bit. But when I started going to the Coptic Church, I recognized parts that were similar, but There was a lot of things that I didn't understand about. Beautiful and simple and edifying. I had less of a, I don't want to say emotional connection to it. I just had less of a familiarity with it. So this book, This Is My Body, The Rite of the Liturgy Explained, by Bishop Raphael, is just that. It explains the entire Coptic Orthodox liturgy. And it is another very accessible, easy one. And it goes through each part and each prayer, a little bit of the history, a little bit of the theology, and the symbolism. That's the most beautiful part, is all of the symbolism, to understand like every spoon of incense that goes into the censer means something, and every sign. This is why the priest doesn't make the sign of the cross over the bread or the wine after this certain point, because he's not the priest anymore, right? It's Christ himself is present. And here's why he does this with water after the sermon. And I'm not going to spoil any of that. You're just going to have to read the book. But this is probably the best explanation I found of it. And keep in mind that as far as English explanations of things are concerned, we're still in an era where there's not a ton of fantastic resources. It's getting better, for sure. But this book was incredible. Question. You've made a probably unintentional visual pun with that shelf. You're sitting right below perfection. Ooh. Well, the thing is, you have to put the pieces into the slot and make the right selection. But be quick. You're racing the clock. Pop goes perfection. This is why I keep pointing to the wrong side. This is why every millennial has anxiety. It's because of perfection. I promise you. Veritas. So were you considered Berenstein Bears? Were you considered Byzantine Orthodox before becoming Coptic? Eastern Orthodox, I guess properly. Byzantine Orthodox, yes, would be true. So yeah, I was formally, I could admit this, I was formally received into the Eastern Orthodox Church. I was never formally in the Catholic Church. I just attended that parish for a long time. I made a lot of connections there. And I wrestled with the idea of becoming Coptic Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, because of kind of the official break of communion with one body officially and joining with another. But the human element, right? I mean, when I started this whole thing, my family was not united. We weren't on the same page. We weren't going to church together. We were struggling. It was causing a lot of spiritual tension. How do we raise our children? And I think there's an unhealthy, toxic culture in the apostolic streams where it's like, just move forward. Your spouse will come along, your children will come along. And it's rooted in something beautiful, which is kind of an idea of just trust God. Yeah, of course, just trust God, pray, but just trust God to do it in his timing for all of you together as much as you can. I'm not saying that has to be the case for everybody, but it was unhealthy for me and my family unit, as it were. So when there came this place where my wife also fell in love with this Coptic church that I was falling in love with, I had to wrestle with that and just believe that that's where God was leading us. And later, after entering the Coptic church, I got connected with this really, really amazing, beautiful priest in Canada. Several really amazing, beautiful, wonderful priests in Canada have just made me feel so at home. But one of them said to me, he was like, it's one kingdom. All of our saints smell the same. And that all of our saints smell the same. I want you to really conceptualize that for a minute. Just this idea of anytime there's an apparition of a saint, it's always associated with this fragrance, this smell that comes up, right? And it's always described as being like this otherworldly, floral, sweet, beautiful smell. Whether they're Eastern Orthodox, whether they're Oriental Orthodox, whether they're Catholic, the smell of roses is common. So they're coming from the same place. They're bringing the same smell with them, for what it's worth. And that gives me a lot of peace too. So is Byzantine Eastern in communion with Catholicism, but Coptic is not? So this gets confusing because there's 24 individual churches that make up the Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic is the largest of them. Actually, the second largest is the Ukrainian Catholic. And then there's a number of other ones the other 23 are considered Eastern Catholic churches that have various rites. There's Byzantine Rite, which is kind of like the Ruthenian Byzantine Catholic Church. In the United States, you just see things called the Byzantine Catholic Church. There's the Ukrainian Catholic Church. There's the Russian Catholic Church that a lot of people don't even know it exists because it's so small. And then there's the Alexandrian Rite, which represents the Coptic Catholic Church, the Ethiopian Catholic Church, the Armenian Catholic Church. Most of the Orthodox churches have a counterpart that is either has reestablished communion with Rome or has always had it. So, like, if I'm not mistaken, the Melkites have always had communion with Rome. They've never broken that. So to say I spent time in a Byzantine Catholic church, that church was in communion with the Catholic Church. But like the Orthodox churches that I was part of, the Serbian Orthodox Church and the Orthodox Church in America, they are not in communion with Rome. The Coptic Church is also not in communion with Rome. There was a very fruitful dialogue going on for a long time, but unfortunately around the time of the Dread Fiducia Supplicans document, that dialogue was cut off. But I'm to understand that there was still a very large number of bishops from the Coptic Orthodox Church present at Pope Francis's funeral. So we've been very friendly with one another. The two churches have. I think the Coptic Church is probably like the most ecumenical of a lot of churches, and it could all work out someday. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Big question, brother, says John, my friend from church, was going to wait for our lunch date, but how do you get over language barrier and culture barrier, tradition? Yeah, I'm kind of weird about that. Like I've always had a love for languages, so it's not intimidating to me to just learn a language, or at least try to. A lot of times it's because I feel like, no matter what, when I enter a situation where there's a different language spoken, at least in this country, I'm still not like in the minority of people, right? So I try to at least learn a phrase or two to just show people that I respect them and like to make them feel comfortable or welcome. And that's fun to me. Our Coptic church is cool in that there's screens, there's televisions, TVs up everywhere that have the liturgy, the words of the liturgy in 3 languages. I held up the number 4 when I said 3, which was stupid, but 3 if you're in Europe. English, Coptic, and Arabic. So it was quite easy to follow along with it. And actually having the visual of being able to just see the words that were up so that my head's not down in a book the whole time helped me connect with what's going on in the altar and the words that are there. That's liturgically. Now, as far as like just an everyday conversation, I mean, it wasn't really an issue in talking with people. And I also just love culture. I don't know. I've always loved different things like different foods and traditions, and I try to collect as many of those things as I can. But none of it, if you spend any amount of time in anything, it stops being weird if you're willing to let go of some sense of maybe entitlement or pride if it's there, Like I spent time in the Ukrainian tradition for a long time, loved it, fell in love with all of it, and still keep a lot of it in my spiritual life. Like when Pascha comes around, you better believe I'm still putting together a Pascha basket, and I'm still saying Christos Voskres and, things like that. Whether that's inauthentic or not, I don't know. You can call me a LARPer, you can call me an imposter, but it became a part of who I am. Around Christmas, I'm keeping the Serbian traditions. We have the wheatgrass growing on the table, and a lot of things like that. It says sermons are tough when 45 minutes in Arabic. Yeah, that part is hard, I have to say. But my son asked me about this one time, and he was like, why isn't it in English? And I said, you have to remember that this is our church. We belong here. This is our home. But before it was our home, it was everybody else who's here's home. And at a certain point in time, everybody who came here came from Egypt. And they came to a weird country that was weird to them, that had weird customs and traditions, and spoke a language that they maybe didn't understand great or couldn't speak very well. And they were forced in everyday situations to speak that language that they didn't speak or understand potentially very well. And when they came to this church, it was the only place that they could come, that they could speak their language and have their food and their traditions. And because of that, because of those things, these people were able to not only bring along their language and their food and their traditions, but they were able to bring along their faith, this beautiful faith that we found and now we treasure and hold on to dearly, and it's become our own. So if it means we have to deal with some of that other stuff to have this thing, it is 100% worth it. That's kind of a long form answer for that. Next book. This one should be a no-brainer as I jump into this, but the Agpeya, the prayer book of the Coptic Orthodox Church, the Book of the Hours. I fell in love with this and its simplicity. Again, it's always the simplicity. Everything just became so complicated with all these theological minutiae. And like, if you pick up prayer books sometimes, thanks for being here, man. It's so good to see you. I hope I see you a lot more. If you pick up prayer books in like some of the Catholic traditions, right, you got these fat books, either multiple volumes or like all these different ribbons, because you have these movable parts and you have like this day, or you're on this cycle of the readings. Or if you pick up the Orthodox prayer books, they have 2-3 ribbons in them, and it's like, okay, move to this part, move to that part. Here's the hymn for the day. Here's this for this day. The Agpeya is literally the same thing every time. You have the different hours, 1st through 12th. And there's the same introduction for each one. There's a number of psalms, different litanies, the Lord's Prayer, the Creed, and some conclusions. And it is just delightfully simple to use. And if you can really become authentic in learning to mean words that you didn't come up with, in words that you say all of the time and not become numb to them, you will notice something new every single time. And again, the fact that it's just psalms, like 12 or more psalms for each hour, it's literally just another way to enter into scripture. So it was incredibly liberating in a way, and also just incredibly edifying to start praying using the Agpeya. And there's a number of different versions of this. Some translations are better than others. This isn't even the one that I use most of the time. It's on my prayer, on the shelf in my prayer corner, in my icon corner. But you can find these dirt cheap all over the place. Most monasteries have them for like $5 or less. And then the final one, which was kind of the book that I picked up last, before being received into the Coptic Orthodox Church. The week before we were received into the church, I went to a Coptic Orthodox monastery in Newberry Springs, California, St. Anthony Coptic Orthodox Monastery, which I've been told, as far as monasteries in the United States are concerned, is the most authentic or the most similar to monasteries in Egypt. And I went with the question of, okay, is this really, I've read the books, I get the theology, I get the experience in the parish, but I still feel this disconnect between what I fell in love with in like the Russian Orthodox theological tradition, or the Slavic version of Orthodoxy, and what I experience here. I think they're both equally beautiful, equally powerful, equally holy. But are they the same thing, or are they two different things? Am I really losing something by taking this? I was kind of wrestling with that and praying through that. So in the gift shop of the monastery, my priest said, get this. He said, when I was younger, I always had this book and my Bible open, both books at the same time. And this book is by Father Matthew the Poor, who kind of, to bookend everything, was a disciple of Pope Kyrillos VI. It's just this beautiful, deeply spiritual ascetic of the desert. So it's Orthodox Prayer Life, the Interior Way. And what he goes through all these things, like what is prayer, the greatness of prayer, the necessity of prayer, the efficacy of prayer, degrees of prayer, going beyond prayer. Again, freeing the soul, purification, contrition, struggle and constrained faith, silence, all these different things. But the thing that was really interesting about it was that each section he would pull together a bunch of sayings from saints, from church fathers. And he was always pulling from both Russian saints and like the desert saints of the Coptic tradition. And as I'm reading both of these and experiencing this life in this monastery, I mean, getting up at 3 a.m. to go to the monastery, to pray midnight praises, to pray divine liturgy, to spend 5, 6, 7 hours in liturgy before the sun, before even, breakfast, right after the sun's up, we're finishing. And just to see the way that the monks pray and carry themselves and the beauty of all of that gave me complete assurance that this is exactly what I read when I read about, monastics and ascetics in the forests of Russia. Like when I read about Saint Seraphim of Sarov, whom I love so deeply. He still is a patron saint of mine. He was my patron saint in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Saint Moses the Strong, Saint Moses the Black is the name that I took in being received into the Coptic Church. But to see that those two saints smell the same, they sound the same, they're from the same cloth. Just another extremely practical, beautiful book. He also brings in some Western saints. He talks to Saint Augustine and Saint Cassian, all these. So highly, I'm actually probably about to reread this one. So there was those. Now, book number 10 is actually a cheat because I read this after entering the Coptic Orthodox Church. But it is it's a fiction book written by a Coptic priest. And it addresses kind of all this kind of healthy ecumenism and just the need for going into the lowest places and to serving people and just living a life of simplicity and humility. And it's a book called Elements, The Transfiguration of Elijah. It's a 2-volume series, and there's a couple other books related to it. I read all 5 books in less than 2 months, I think it was. Honestly, if I were to recommend you read any book from this list, it would be this one. By a priest of the Oriental Church. And I will not tell you who he is, even though I know, because he would be very upset with me if I did. I just flew through it. It's so profoundly beautiful. It follows the story of a character named Elijah, who from his youngest days to having childlike faith, to losing his faith, to materialism, to incredible loss and pain, to a pilgrimage journey, almost like a hero's journey of his own, traveling all over the world, tons of experiences. So highly recommend Elements. The theme between all of these books is simplicity and beauty and humility and accessibility. There's just freedom that I found that I haven't had in a while in embracing the Coptic Church. In a way, it made me love everything that I found in Catholicism and Orthodoxy, Eastern Orthodoxy, more, because I wasn't caught in this constant ping pong battle between the two. And it's a small enough communion, at least in the United States, that most people don't even know it exists. Or if they do know it exists, they think it's like an ethnic social club, and it's not, as I said, a live option to go visit. But it's there. And if you find yourself in a similar boat, like, check it out. Even if you just need a respite for a little while. It's my hope that I can visit all the churches now in my communion at some point. I'd love to visit an Armenian church, an Ethiopian church. Where I am in the Pittsburgh area, there's an Ethiopian mission that has liturgy like once a year. I'm trying very hard eventually to make it to that, which would be beautiful. Maybe that could be another thing where I don't know. I don't even know if I want to document it. Everybody does these church tour things, but nobody's doing it with anything other than the Coptic Church, and there's very few of those. So I don't know. Maybe I'll do it. But there's been books I've read since then. Honorable mentions, I guess. One is Oriental Orthodoxy Unveiled, which really handles all of the churches in the Oriental Communion and not just the Coptic one, which is a beautiful one. The Crucified Jesus, I read during Holy Week this year, which really reinvigorated a robust theology of the cross for me. It's another one that's on my shelf. This white one right here. It's the interesting thing about the Coptic Church to me is that I feel like it's this really special bridge between East and West in a lot of ways. There's a lot of elements of it that are very similar to kind of the Roman Catholic West. One being, I think, a robust theology of the cross. When I was a Protestant, it was all the cross, the cross, the cross. The cross is our salvation. Only the cross is our salvation. And the resurrection is basically just like a necessary afterthought to prove that he was God. And then I discovered Orthodoxy, that's like all resurrection all the time, which is fantastic, right? Like he's defeated our enemies. He defeated death by death. And that's not to say that there is no theology of the cross and the atonement. But really this year, reading that book and entering into the mysteries of Holy Week, of Pascha Week in the Coptic Orthodox Church, especially the Holy Friday service, which is just this marathon. It's 9 hours long. All these readings, this kind of this burial service, partnering all of that together with kind of the brutality and the suffering of the cross helped me reconnect with it in a way that I hadn't in a very long time. And that was just for me, just to think like, man, Jesus, you did that. And you did that for me by name and everybody else by name, but me. And I don't know, just the deeper reality of what that means to live a cruciform life was wild. Derek says, what, if any, difference are there with the Coptic and Catholic Coptic? I know that's very small, though. Ostensibly, there should not be any difference between the two, but there are. The Coptic Catholic Church, at least what I've seen in the United States, the handful of parishes that exist, kind of look like a Novus Ordo Mass in Coptic vestments, maybe with the addition of the symbols that are used, like symbols and the Coptic liturgy. But the language is there. Sometimes the hymns are the same. Sometimes they're more Latinized or Westernized. But it should, in the same way that all of the Byzantine Catholic churches should look identical to its Orthodox counterpart. What else? Anybody else have any other thoughts or questions, complaints, requests? I'm really thinking about doing this from time to time. This is a good time. I do invite everybody to check out the locals page. There's a link in the description, adoseoftheosis.locals.com. I started that like 2 years ago, maybe longer now, more or less as an offshoot from a kind of special project I did for the Pints with Aquinas locals page, the Matt Frad locals page. And it's become, I don't know, it's not my thing. I'll tell you that. It's actually a community of people. And I'd love to see everybody that's in there post more of what they're working on and what they're thinking through and what they're praying about. All of the traditions and communions that I've mentioned so far are represented there. There's Roman Catholics, Byzantine Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, Coptic Orthodox. Actually, a recent supporter in the locals community was the inspiration for me wanting to even do this stream on YouTube. She said, I just found you there. I watched your interview with Tilo. I watched your interview with Deacon Henoch, and I just loved the story. So she came and joined us there. But it's kind of where I workshop these ideas. I sort of did this going through the books thing in there not too long ago. Sometimes it's just fun. Did a live stream building a Lego set. You can kind of, see part of it there. It's the Great Pyramid of Giza, which was a gift from a good friend. Sometimes my wife and I get on there and talk about things and joke around. But a lot of times we're reading through books. Like we've read through a chunk of the 21 on there. I'm pretty sure we read through several chapters of this book on there. There's just a lot of these things. Pray together. And really the coolest part of it was recently we did the Meetup, which everybody who's here and knows about that. Just in-person events are really the premium thing now, and people are looking for that. So we got together. People came from Canada, from Wisconsin, from Boston, and we hung out in Pittsburgh. We had coffee. We prayed together. We met with a Byzantine Catholic priest. We went to visit the largest collection of relics outside of the Vatican. We had several fantastic meals together. Most of them experienced an Eastern liturgy for the first time. We met with our Coptic priest, talked about the Coptic tradition and the beauty of that, and kind of the history of martyrdom and persecution and the simplicity of the desert spirituality. And it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. And I want to do more of that. And I'd love to bring some more people into that. So if any of this sounds like something that you're interested in, come check it out, adosatheosis.locals.com. You would be most welcome there. And the beautiful thing about a community like that is it kind of keeps the trolls out. So something like this on YouTube is far riskier than that. So you'd be welcome to come hang out. All right, that's all I got. If there's no other questions or thoughts or anything, I'm going to call it a night. But I'm really glad that you popped in to check this out. And I hope it was edifying to you in some way. And forgive any pride that I expressed, and forgive any mistakes that I made or any misspoken things that I did. Yeah, just here to share. Peace.